are live.
Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the Administration Committee of the Commission on Ethics and Lobbying in Government. Sandy, is there business that we need to take care of before we discuss the agenda, or can I get right to that?
Yes, let me just say that due notice of this meeting was posted in accordance with our resolutions and regulations. The meeting is being conducted pursuant to the provisions of the Open Meetings Law and in accordance with Section 94 of the Executive Law. We have a quorum at this time at our offices in Albany at 540 Broadway, where the conference room is open to the public to observe during open session, as well as at the New York State Conference Center at 25 Beaver Street in Manhattan, which is also open to the public to observe during open session. So we may proceed at this time. And I should add that one or more members of the committee, the administration committee, are participating in this meeting pursuant to Section 103-A of the Public Officers Law out of extraordinary circumstances. May proceed.
Okay. All right, thanks. So today's agenda has three items. The first is an introduction, which we're in now. The second is to talk about the Commission's workflow and review where we are and think about what changes people might suggest to make the Commission work more efficiently. And the third item, we'll discuss an executive session. I want to start by saying this is my first meeting as chair of the Administration Committee. I've asked people by email if they have items that they want to suggest for our agenda, and had discussions with several of you. Today we're going to focus on the Commission's workflow, which I think is something that lots of you have suggested talking about. But there are other items that we plan to look at future times. So I guess I just want to pause and ask, other than what's already been discussed, are there items that people want to add? The two things that we're really not talking about today that are on my agenda are the process around our budget and the extent to which commissioners should be involved in both the preparation of the budget and the process of lobbying for its adoption. And I also have a note that it's been suggested we look at the per diem submission process and talk about how that process works. Again, those are not on the agenda for today, but those are two items that I have on the agenda. We're going to be talking about the process for evaluating the executive director, and there's been some conversation about a commission's self-evaluation, as well as the question of whether the commissioners should be involved in the evaluation of staff in any way. I thought those are both things that are likely to come up in the discussion of the evaluation of the executive director. And at this point, that's my list of the topics that have been suggested for this group. So does anybody want to raise other topics?
I have a question more than raising a topic.
Sure.
Is administrations when the process of the budget, or will it be the special committee that Fred convenes dealing with the budget?
I think that special committee was just for the current budget so that we could get something submitted once Sandy got the letter. And then as it turns out, that call for COLIC's budget, at least preliminary budget, came much sooner than we had anticipated. So our special committee didn't get to weigh in. The question is, would there be another time for that special committee? But I think we should look at the broader question for going forward, how does the commission weigh in on the budget? I think this committee that we organized for this year's submission would sunset once a budget is actually submitted, and leave open the question that I think Commissioner Ayers has raised about, so the commission more formalizing perhaps how the commission is actually involved in the budget development and then submission and then advocacy.
Got it.
Okay, thanks. Anything else people want to raise before we get started? Okay, so then let me start our discussion of the commission's workflow and committees. This is something that the chair had asked this group to take a look at. It's also something that various commissioners have raised at different points. And so I thought I'd start with a really brief review of where we are now and then move into the discussion. So right now there are two basic sources of law that govern our workflow, our process, and our committees. One, of course, is Executive Law 94, which creates the commission and sets out our basic requirements and powers. And the other is Resolution 22-04, which was passed before I joined the commission, but which creates a series of standing committees. So under that commission, it's the chair who designates the leadership of those committees, and of course the chair is also empowered to create other more ad hoc bodies as necessary. We also have a couple of draft documents that have been bouncing around for a while, including a draft that I wrote after our discussion in the May 2023 meeting. At that meeting, the commission members voted to agree that essentially everybody's invited to every meeting if they want to be. And I'm looking at that session. We agreed that any commissioner can attend any committee meeting. Only committee members can vote. All materials presented to the committee will be shared with all commissioners. Committees can't vote on issues, but only analyze them and make recommendations, and so forth. So we never passed a resolution codifying that decision, but we've talked about it a bunch. And then there's also a document called Committee Procedures that's been circulating, which, Committee Procedures or Commission Procedures, that essentially enacts the requirements of the, or affirms the requirements of the Open Meetings Law, and talks about how we follow those. So there's a bunch of documents out there. I think at this meeting, what we want to do is not edit any of those documents, but my goal is to gather thoughts from people in the hopes that we can see where folks think we are and talk about ideas for making the commission overall work more efficiently and effectively. So what I thought we would start with is a discussion of what's been working well and what could be working better. Before we get to specific proposals and what might work better, although people are free to do that if they want, my sense is that, overall, I think we've gotten a lot done in our first year as a commission, and I think that we've coalesced as a group. I also think that there's been inefficiencies, and we can do better in our second year than we did in our first year. So, I noticed that my own sense is we seem to be naturally moving away from, I say naturally, I mean without any formal resolution to this effect, we seem to be moving a bit away from relying on the standing committees and more towards ad hoc structures. That we seem to have more and more sort of working group meetings, individual commissioners working with staff on things and preparing presentations for the full group. And I wonder if that's because, the standing committees, it's challenging to organize committee meetings. It's difficult for people to drive in. And there's also, I think, been, again, this is just my own view and people are free to disagree, But my view is there's been discussions in the committees that have proven to be somewhat redundant in the sense that we discuss the same issues again when we come back in the full commission. And I think we've also seen individual commissioners feeling excluded sometimes by those smaller group meetings, and I think that's something that we want to work on. I also think overall we've been working towards planning better and thinking about timelines more. And I think that's, with the help of staff guiding us, we've had sort of big meetings where, in retrospect, it would have been better if they were organized earlier. The roundtable that we had, I think, was great, but I think our answer to a lot of the suggestions that were raised is we need more time to analyze this, so maybe we'll take it up next session. I think it would be worthwhile to consider an overall calendar so that we can make sure we have time to analyze things as we need to. So I have other thoughts, but I guess I want to open it up and ask everybody to speak about what they think we could be doing more efficiently or what they think could be going better. So can I get a volunteer?
Yes.
All right, Commissioner Cardozo, please.
Frank, we've been moving inefficiently. I think really one of the major reasons is the open meetings law requirement.
I'm sorry, Michael, I'm having a hard time hearing you. You're coming in and out.
Yeah, we can't hear you very well at all.
Yeah.
I'm not known generally for not being able to be heard. Is this better?
That's perfect, yes.
It is, yeah, thanks.
I think the problem with the open meetings law requiring us as a practical matter to meet at headquarters is interfering with that. And that's, of course, a different issue. We're trying to change that. But I think that as a practical matter, if we just had ad hoc committees, we have the budget or we had the legislative agenda. And if and Fred and Sandy say, okay, X, Y, and Z commissioners, please do this, and you got to get this done in 2 months, or whatever it is, we might end up working more efficiently. On the other hand, I can well see that then we're losing the expertise that may be developed. And I think the Education Committee is a prime example because I think Claudia has pulled together a lot of issues, and when new ones come up, she's referred to it, and I guess my committee, the committee I had on communications, is part of the same thing. But unfortunately, I don't think our committee structure is working. And one potential alternative is when you have a committee meeting, in all due respect to the commissioners who are not in attendance, that they shouldn't be in attendance. That because we're really having, as a practical matter, as Eva said, the meeting twice. We're having, since we're inviting everybody to the meeting if they want to come, and then we're repeating the same issues when it's discussed by all commissioners. And so another alternative I would suggest is that the committee meeting, while everyone can, I guess, attend, you should limit it to that and not have speeches or not submit the various documents, assuming that's legal. But I think maybe that at least for the next 6 months, we should say, okay, we have a legislative committee or whatever, we continued on the revolving door, the discussion, and we have a budget committee. We know that is critical, and we need to have a legislative committee of some kind to follow up on what's going on in terms of our legislative agenda. I'm very pessimistic that we can go beyond that.
Sorry, just to clarify, and I see Commissioner Edwards, I'll call on you next, but just to be clear, Commissioner Cardozo, your view is we should have the committee meetings, but keep them more focused and limited in terms of who's there? Is that the idea?
Assuming that's legal, and I'm not sure it is.
As I read both the executive law and the open meetings law that is acceptable. Anyone can observe. Anyone can observe. It's up to the body to determine what the rules are for participation in meetings. And if you're going to preserve the concept of constituency, whether they're ad hoc committees or permanent committees, in order, even if only to satisfy the quorum requirements, we need to define who the active participants are.
Okay.
And then there is the
Commissioner Edwards.
participation of persons.
I guess I don't agree with the observations that's been made so far. I would agree that one of the problems with the committee structure is the open meetings law. It's just absolutely inconvenient it's almost impossible to schedule committee meetings between sessions, getting everyone, at a place where it's legal for us to operate. And so, like we have to have a quorum. There are 3 on this committee. That makes no sense to me. And there have been instances where I've held committee meetings and someone didn't show up, and it was a waste of time for everyone else because we couldn't really perform any duties. So I think one of the reasons why the committee structure doesn't work is because of the confinements that we have to live with under the open meetings law. Number 2, I think that I agree that having the committees, one value of having committees is that you have people on the committee who develops a certain level of expertise and knowledge of what's taking place, in around the committee subject. And I think moving away from that would be a disservice. There's been poor communications in terms of calling the meetings, getting back to folks in terms of what was actually discussed, and it created this sense that, a sense of distrust, which may not be founded. I just think it's poor communications. Like, for example, we had agreed when we have a committee, anyone is welcome to come, but we've never walked away with a sense of whose responsibility it was to communicate that to the other members. So maybe it was my responsibility. I never did that. And I assume in some cases it was the staff's responsibility. Not any of the staff, it's just that we never discussed it. And so they were left wondering the same. So I think we should spend some time figuring out, the game plan with regard to how we should operate and function, and then make some determination whether or not it's working or not. I think this notion of ad hoc committees doesn't work. And I think it causes even more disservice because it's, I say it. I don't know how to express it, but I think that making the decision to call people as issues involved, everyone who's interested in that on that particular subject may or may not be able to participate. And I just think if you assign it to a committee, it would be more appropriate than just having individuals working one-on-one with the executive director or whatever entity we should be working with.
Okay, thanks. So it sounds like, just to summarize back, the issue about what's communicated out of the committees is important, but your view is committees are important, number one, because of the expertise that they develop, and number two, because moving to an ad hoc committee can actually be more exclusionary in the sense that not everybody may be able to attend, and the structure may be less clear in terms of who's supposed to communicate it out and that kind of thing. Okay, great. Other folks? Looks like, Fred, I think I see your hand.
Can't hear you.
You're muted.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I would agree with, to some degree, with both Commissioner Cardozo and Commissioner Edwards. On the one hand, I think we should do some type of evaluation of how the committees have worked to date, and ask also whether or not do we need all the committees that we have? Can some be combined or perhaps eliminated? And for any number of reasons. I mean, one, we should do an evaluation of committees and ourselves and everybody else. And then two, there may be some committees that we actually do need to keep where we develop deep expertise, as both commissioners Cardozo and Edwards have said. But on the other hand, I think that we should have the flexibility of having ad hoc committees as needed. So something special comes up, for example, the executive director says, I need some quick advice on drafting a brief for a particular case. And it's not anything that the entire legal committee necessarily needs to be convened to discuss, but a small group of people could meet with the executive director to talk to him about the brief, or the general counsel or the general counsel about a brief, and then have it, submitted, and then report back to the full body, and then that ad hoc group goes out of existence. So I think that there are some committees that are needed for reasons that have been stated. I think we should evaluate the ones perhaps and see if they're ones we don't need or if they can be consolidated. But I'd like to encourage us to maintain the flexibility of appointing ad hoc committees that would do a brief task and then sunset.
I'm good with that.
Commissioner Caraballo, I think I see your hand.
Yes, you do. So I think that the issue with the ad hoc committees is that it seems that there's just a little core group that is part of the meetings and communications and, meetings with staff and communications with staff and each other, that excludes the rest of us. And I think it seems kind of clear to me who are the people that are not included. And I sent some press clips. It seems like it's publicly acknowledged, to some extent, that there are certain commissioners that are left out of the group and others that are included. And it's just not a good look, I think, for an ethics commission to not reflect what we want our public agencies and our offices to look like, and to function, and the way that they function. I think that's our goal, right? To make sure everyone's kind of included, and it runs in a way that is cohesive and again, inclusive. So that's the issue with the ad hoc committee. I think there is a group of you that speak constantly to one another. And so that becomes a group that's going to work on these emergency issues. And I could be wrong, but that's what it sounds like to me when I'm in a meeting and I don't know what's going on. And there are like 4 or 5 of you that do. So I think that's the issue with the ad hoc committees.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's certainly not the first time that we've heard people expressing that concern in meetings. Let's see, Commissioner James, do you have thoughts?
Well, I was limiting my participation because I'm really not a committee member, but I do believe that we should continue with our committees. And I think the ad hoc committees, as matters arise, may be needed. I think we probably ought to be making sure that everybody is aware of what these ad hoc committees are, and looking to be more perhaps more inclusive of all the members of the commission. I don't think there was, from my perspective, I don't think there was any intent to exclude people, but it certainly it gave that appearance. So I guess we need to be more cautious about how we assign people to these ad hoc committees, it and it shouldn't be the same people on all the ad hoc committees. And although I don't think it has been that case, that hasn't been the case, but we should be cautious about that and make sure that we're as inclusive as possible with all of our commission members.
Okay, thanks. Commissioner Cardozo.
Is there a way to compromise this? I think one of the things we're saying is that some of the committees are not able to report this on a particular issue. Is there a way to perhaps have each committee say we're going to schedule a meeting at least once a month and schedule it in advance? This administrative committee, we've a long time to schedule this meeting. Because I think one of the problems is we have things that back up. I mean, the code of conduct, for example, I think we just started discussing it in March and didn't adopt it until the last meeting. And some of it was because we had some disagreements. But I just wonder if the crux of the problem is that when there are time essential decisions needed, we have a hard time having a relevant committee take a look at it. And there's plenty that happens every month. And is it say, okay, the communications committee is going to meet, is going to be composed of A, B, and C, and they will meet every third, just making it up, every third Thursday, or they'll schedule at least a month in advance the next meeting so that we don't have the problem that I think we've been having for a long time of simply the inability to schedule a meeting. And that's why sometimes I think we're forced to create the ad hoc committees. But virtually every issue that one of the committees is looking at, we should be having ongoing meetings about.
I see someone has raised their hand, but unfortunately my screen doesn't show me who.
That's me, Commissioner Ayers.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so I would agree with Michael, but I think we've got two challenges. One is the requirements of the open meetings law, and I'm hoping we'll get some relief from that in this next legislative session based on recommendations that this commission will make as a part of the legislative package. Trying to convene monthly meetings when you have 6 committees and commissioners are represented in various configurations on those committees, so they can be on as many as 3. So it means they're meeting 3 times a month, theoretically in person, plus the regular commission meeting. So that's kind of one hurdle, but the other is then that puts a burden on staff to get all of those meetings organized, particularly if they're going to be in person. So I would agree that we need to establish regular meetings, but I'm hoping the open meetings law will give us some relief from having to be in place for all of those meetings, because right now it's both burdensome and in many ways impractical to do as you're suggesting, but it's the thing that needs to be done.
If I could just interrupt that, we have to recognize that we're going to work very hard on the open meetings change. It expires in July of 24. The present law expires in July 24. So if history is any lesson, if there is a change, it's going to be made in June of 2024 as a practical matter. And so what we're talking about is even if there is a change in the open meetings law, it's not happening for a while.
Right. So if I could jump in, I think this has been helpful, and I want to move to inviting folks to suggest specific ideas. We've heard some already, and I want to add one of my own. So I think part of the issue with including people is that everybody on the commission should know who's working on what and what our list of issues is that needs to be addressed. So I talked to Fred earlier, and I volunteered because when you suggest that somebody do something, you ought to generally volunteer that you be the one to do it. To just keep a list of pending tasks that the commission needs to address, issues that need to be addressed, and who's responsible for those issues. My sense is that there's sort of a general, Commissioner Edwards, I see you, I'll come to you next. My sense is that sometimes part of the issue with people feeling excluded is that not everybody even realizes that an issue is on our agenda and then sort of hears about it only after there's been a discussion. I think it would be helpful for inclusiveness to have a list of all pending tasks and to whom they've been referred. I also think it would help us make sure that things don't fall between the cracks. There have been some issues that got referred to a committee. There was one, I was just looking back at my notes, in April, we decided that a committee would look at the issue of how full an explanation we give complainants when we dismiss a complaint. That issue was raised in a meeting, referred to committee, and then never taken up. I think it'd be helpful to make sure that we have a list, and I'm happy to maintain that list. The other thing I think that would do is it sounds like there's something approaching a consensus that I'm hearing that committees are useful for some things, and for other things, a different approach works. We talked about ad hoc committees. There's a third option, which is just to have an individual commissioner liaise with staff on whatever the issue is and present something to the full commission when the full commission meets. We've done that with a number of issues. I think it's been quite successful for a number of issues. It works best when there's one commissioner who's particularly interested in working on it. Sandy and I have been discussing the plan for a comprehensive review. Sandy sent a proposal and now he's waiting back for my comments. I think it looks really good, Sandy. I'm sorry for not getting back to you yet, but I think it's working really well. And so, I do think that there are some situations where that's a good model. I think it's better if the full commission knows that's happening so that, if a second commissioner says, hey, I'm actually really interested in that too, then folks can reach out and have a conversation with that commissioner. But that's one thought that I have, and I guess that's really two thoughts. One is let's keep a list, and I'm volunteering to do it. And the other is, sorry, I'm a little distracted because suddenly everybody in New York just went out of focus. That's weird. I don't know. The camera has just decided to focus on something off screen. It's strange. I can all still see you. You're blurry versions of yourself. It's like a 1980s album cover.
We lost our focus. I apologize.
Yeah. Right. Well, I suppose that's meta appropriate. Anyway, and then I think, I second the chair's thought that, while some of our committees have been meeting actively, communications, the legislation working group, which is not a committee but has been working as an ad hoc working group, we have other committees that don't meet. And I strongly agree with Fred's point that you can't have 6 committees meeting every month. The staff resources involved in organizing a committee meeting are substantial. So I think we should take a tough look at, which of these committees are important, which of them should be having regular meetings. And it's smaller than the number that's in Resolution 2204 in my view. But I would suggest we take a look at that. So now I guess I just want to open it up for other suggestions or thoughts about what we might revisit or what we might want to propose.
What, if I may, what the staff has suggested in the past, and it has been used by a number of committees, and that's to use the other means of communication that are available to share ideas, to collaborate, and in some instances move the ball along, at least to the point where if a meeting does become necessary, it can be conducted much more efficiently. But it is perfectly permissible to communicate by email, to share ideas, to circulate draft proposals, and to get a good deal of work done that way without the need convene a formal meeting. You know, again, the committee work
Yeah.
is advisory only in any event. Ultimately, whatever the work product is has to be taken up by the full commission at a fully convened meeting. And I think that has worked in a number of instances, in any instances.
Yeah.
The work of the commission.
So,
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that's an important channel as well. And it's easier with email to include everybody.
but, yeah.
Commissioner Edwards, you had your hand up earlier, and then Commissioner Caraballo, I see you.
Yeah,
Commissioner Edwards?
I think you answered much of my concerns, but I do think that in terms of a concrete proposal moving to next, I think we probably should take a hard look at the existing committees that are now standing and decide, make some determination as to which one should be standing and deciding on the kinds of issues that may generate the need for an ad hoc group to look at specific topics.
Mhm.
We probably should do, each committee should self-reflect to see whether or not the goals and objectives that we've set for ourselves is now appropriate now that we've had about a year to work with it and bring that back to the chair. And maybe we can see where overlaps might be occurring and where we can eliminate in some instances. I also wanted to comment that I think the whole notion of feeling excluded, yes, it's there. I really don't think it's been intentional. I just think it's an oversight. And we can work better at eliminating it, but I never got the impression it was intentional. I don't feel,
Mhm.
like we're cliquish. I just think that a lot of us, we're just inundated with work. If somebody calls, they get picked to the work.
Yeah. Okay, Commissioner Caraballo.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, I'm not going to comment on Commissioner Edwards' comments. It does appear that way, and I think public perception is an important part of what we do. And how, it is just extremely important that our commission have a good look as well as doing good work, and we can do both. I think it would be helpful to have a list of each committee and committee member, each ad hoc committee, each staff commissioner liaison that is happening, because there's a lot of stuff going on that I just really don't know about, and not because I'm not interested and not because I would not like to know. I really would like to know. And I understand it's difficult to do things. I don't think it should be difficult to do things where the whole commission at least doesn't know what's going on. We don't all have to be active participants. We should all know what's going on. And I think it's important to take a look and see who's doing what, and maybe we can address the issue of exclusion in that way, of the feeling of exclusion, or those people who are not being asked to participate. And I think, I'm just curious, Andy, I kind of think what you're suggesting, I mean, is that we'd like to do work by email and smaller groups and telephones, but I thought the whole issue was that it would run afoul of the open meetings law, and that's why we're not proceeding in that fashion. But if if I'm incorrect,
Yeah, I'm not suggesting holding conference calls without complying with the open meetings law. That would be problematic. But what I'm talking about is individual communications.
individual communications, yeah, and that's the problem. I guess that's what makes it easy.
I mean, as long as the intention is not to circumvent the meeting requirement, then there's no trenching upon the public officers law on Article 7 on the open meetings law. That's not an issue.
But it
I can
creates
write to you,
a
you can write to
situation.
other commissioners expressing your views, and that's perfectly acceptable. In fact, you probably expected to do that in certain circumstances. You can offer your comments. There is no issue there. You can't use serial communications in an attempt to circumvent the meeting requirement, particularly if some decisions are being made. And we could have a more detailed discussion, if you wish, in executive session, and get into the more specific legal issues. But there's plenty of precedent, both judicially and from the Committee on Open Government, on what's acceptable and what isn't in terms of the requirements of the open meeting law. And I'm certainly not even remotely suggesting.
No, I didn't mean to suggest you were, Sandy, at all.
The idea is not to circumvent the requirements of the open meeting law. We're talking about alternative means of communicating and doing work that doesn't require having to conduct a meeting. Really as simple as that.
Right. No, I guess what I was trying to say is I think that's what's creating the situation that we're talking about. The fact that so then a lot of people don't know what's going on because and we can talk about it in executive session if you'd like. But I just think it creates. I understand that it helps us to get work done a little easier and it's more efficient and effective. But it does create a situation that we don't all know what's happening, or at least several of us. And so that's all I'm saying is like I understand that need, but then it also is like individual communications. Sometimes things get lost in the telephone game, like so as it goes to the next person, some things are not included or are included, and it just creates this lack of communal understanding that I would like to have us have. So I didn't mean it as
Okay.
Understood.
anything more
So,
than, huh?
Understood.
So I see Commissioner Cardozo has his hand up, but let me just before then, let me just say I think with communications by email, I mean, my understanding, and Sandy or Keith, please correct me if I'm wrong, but is that there's certainly no problem with, for example, circulating a proposal to the entire commission by email. That's what we do before meetings. That's what we have to do before meetings. So, we're perfectly allowed to have both one-on-one substantive conversations by email and to have full group substantive conversations by email. I think no public body could function if that weren't allowed. And I think that again, anybody please jump in and correct me if I'm wrong. I see somebody has their hand up, and again, I can't tell who.
That's me.
Fred.
That's me.
Chair Fred.
Okay.
Chair Davies.
Fred, Commissioner Cardozo has his hand up. Do you want to jump in quickly on something, or do you want to wait?
Go ahead.
I
Go
can
ahead.
wait.
All
I
right.
just wanted to say,
Commissioner Cardozo, go ahead.
aspect of this is a question of time, because some issues we can predict now, the next, we'll have legislative issues that we're going to focus on. Next November, we're going to have budget issues to focus on. Lots of things that are going to come up more on an ad hoc basis. So in creating defense, we should continue to have standing committees. We take into account in setting them up what key issues we know that particular committee.
So New York has
particular times in the course of the year.
You guys went out and disappeared on us and cut out. So I don't think we got all of that.
Indeed.
I was just suggesting that in putting the committees together, we should take into account what issues will definitely come before that committee at particular times. We know the budget will want to legislative issues covered at the time. Other things are throughout the year, and other things may come up on an ad hoc basis.
Got it. And I agree, and I think it would be, I appreciate the fact that Commissioner Ayers has said that she is willing to keep a list. We should find a way maybe to keep that list on online that's accessible, so that it is accessible to all commissioners in terms of things that are outstanding. So if any commissioner has some concern about, well, what are we working on, or what are the committees working on, or what has been referred to committees, that list exists somewhere that's accessible to every commissioner. I don't know how we do that, but I just put that out there. I also want to say that none of us is ever going to know at all times what's going on with this commission. Most of the times, we don't know what is necessarily going on with the staff and the kinds of things they're working on or what they're working on. Sometimes they're even investigating us and we don't know it. It's going to be difficult to know, even for me as chair, the kinds of conversations that commissioners are having with staff, that commissioners are having among themselves. But where I think where we need to have trust is in the process. And that process is this: nothing can move forward without at least 6 votes of this commission. Now, there are some exceptions to that, but then we hear about it later. For example, a preliminary budget that needed to go to the state, to the, wherever it goes, executive chamber. We got very short notice on that, very short turnaround, so that even the ad hoc committee that was set up to look at that before it went didn't get a chance actually to sign off on it. But what we had seen beforehand was a preliminary budget, and we talked about the things that needed to be changed in the budget. So I want to just really encourage us not to feel like, let me say one more thing before I say that. All of us should work overtime to make sure that information is available. But I want to encourage us not to feel like somehow we're being left out, or there's some information that we don't have. That's true. There is a lot of information that we don't have. But we will get it before we proceed with anything that's official from this commission. It's just going to be impossible for all of us, myself included, any chair included, to have all information, to know what's going on. I had one commissioner suggest that there should be no communication between commissioners outside of regularly scheduled committee meetings or regularly scheduled commission meetings. I'm not paranoid, so I would encourage people to talk to each other, because I am confident that the process that we've set up will allow for input before anything official comes out of this commission. Again, that doesn't mean we should not work harder to make sure that more people who want to do tasks in between meetings have that opportunity. But I just don't want folks to feel like that somehow something's going to get by them, and that people somehow that's in the mix. That's not been my experience.
So if I could just say, since I've budgeted an hour for this discussion and an hour for our executive session. In the last 10 minutes or so, I just want to say that I know that there are some commissioners who aren't here, who are generally opposed to the idea of committees or ad hoc working groups, whose preference would be a model where an individual commissioner is responsible for each issue that comes in front of us, for developing whatever proposal needs to be developed, or working with staff as staff develops that proposal, and then presenting that to the full group, possibly with consultations along the way with whatever commissioners feel strongly about that. My own view is that what works best is going to depend very much on the issue, and that I think it makes sense to have, I think Michael's point when we were losing the video connection makes some sense, which is, look, there are some issues where we know quite a ways in advance that something is going to come up, And when we do, it makes sense to have a group of people who are planned and ready to address it. I also think that we need to be really sensitive to the fact that sometimes the full commission is going to want to have input, and it's going to make more sense to have a full commission meeting. The legislative agenda, we're all just going to have thoughts on. We are. Everybody on the commission is going to have questions, thoughts, ideas. On an issue like that, I personally question the value of having a separate working group, not because it's not important, but just the opposite, because it's so important that I think we might well want to have a second commission meeting in a given month so that everybody can talk about that. Am I frozen?
No, we can hear you.
Okay, sorry, thank you. Sorry, suddenly all the videos went a little bit fuzzy. Anyway, so that's my own view, but I think that it will be more helpful. I'll work with the chair to develop a list of pending tasks and assignments, and I think in light of that, it may be easier to see where there are issues. I also think, to Commissioner Caraballo's point, people will feel a lot less excluded, I suspect, if I just send out an email every time something new gets added to that list that says, hey, there's a new task that's been assigned to such and such, and if you are not the person to whom it's been assigned and you have an interest in this, reach out to the person it's been assigned to and tell them you have an interest, and we'll make sure that you're included in that conversation. I think that's feasible to do, and I think it will help minimize the sense that people are not being engaged. I also wanted to raise one other issue that's not related. I know that I and a lot of us were concerned during our last full commission meeting when we sort of ran out of time towards the end, and the investigations team had to make their presentation in a way that was fairly compressed. And so one thought that was proposed that I quite liked was the idea of reversing the order of our monthly meetings so that the executive session comes first, and then we announce in advance, we'll move into public session at 1 p.m. so that the public doesn't have to sit around and wait and guess when we're going to come back online. But that if we schedule that block of time, then those individual matters will be given a designated block of time in advance. That was one other specific proposal, and I think that the related possibility there is, if we run out of time for matters that we need to discuss as a full commission, I do think that it may make sense to have another full commission meeting, but we should understand that that's a huge burden on staff time. Anyway, I guess the general point is, I think it's important that staff be in charge of scheduling these committee meetings, because sometimes we can end up with a glut or a clog of meetings. And for example, I think that we had so many different meetings scheduled in November that the roundtable that we had, which was very helpful, that Emily and her team weren't able to schedule that as early as they would have liked because of all the other meetings we had and the demands on staff. And as a result, we don't really have enough time to consider for staff to analyze the suggestions from that meeting. So my other thought is, I think it's important that that staff be responsible for scheduling the meetings to the extent that is plausible. And I see that somebody has a hand up.
Who's responsible?
Whoever you are, go ahead.
Who's responsible now for scheduling meetings?
Well, in my view, it's staff. I mean, for this meeting, I asked Sandy and Martha to find a time and schedule it, and it took some time to do that, but I think that's because we had so many other meetings scheduled in November, in October and November. So that's my view, but I think other times commissioners have just reached out themselves to set up meetings.
So I don't want to prolong this,
Yeah.
to disrupt your schedule, but I do want to make this comment regarding the committee meetings. I think it's important to have committees look at issues. I mean, I think we've all been in other organizations where you do assign a committee to examine issues and kind of focus on what the priorities should be, and identify the main issues and then take them back to the full group. And I think that's something that this commission ought to do as well. I don't think we need to have the full commission examining every possible issue that may come before a particular committee. I think it's better to have the committees identify them, uh, focus on which ones they think are most important to bring before the commission, and then have the commission talk about them in depth. So the final decision obviously will be made by the full commission.
Okay, thank you. Other sort of closing thoughts before we move out of this discussion? We do have time. If people have more thoughts, they should feel welcome to go ahead.
I just wanted to say, I thought we had agreed, we haven't had a discussion, a thorough discussion of the various reports on pending investigations and all that for, I think, 2 meetings. We have it right. We appreciate the reports we get and we read them, but we really haven't had time in the last 2 meetings to discuss them in any way. And I think people could criticize us for not really focusing on that. Nobody's fault, but I think picking up on Emily's suggestion, we may have to schedule a separate meeting or change the order of the meetings depending what else is on the agenda. Because we really do need to spend time discussing these various reports.
We started.
I agree. I think when we have a big agenda, like a large set of reports on investigations, we should flip the agenda. And as Commissioner Ayers has stated, go immediately into executive session, let the public know we're going to do that, and deal with the investigative matters as a priority.
Okay, great. Any other thoughts before? Sorry, Fred, what did you say?
I'm sorry. Did we lose New York?
Oh, New York, are you there?
It looks like we
Oh, dear.
lost their video, but they are still there because they're under Martha. I'll
Okay,
text
New
Martha.
York.
Hold on a moment.
If anybody in New York can hear me, could you say so?
They're working on the connection right now.
Okay, great, thank you.
Another priority item should be technology for New York City's, the office in New York
Yeah.
City, because we go through this all the time.
Well, it's funny about the open meetings law that the presumption, I think, was that in-person meetings would bring more transparency. But the truth is, if we're all just on our laptops, we never have these problems.
I agree. And yeah, and part of the challenge, and I realize we're still in public session, but part of the
Yeah.
challenge is there's a bandwidth issue in that New York office. So it would be helpful if commissioners could, when they're even in meetings, log on to their computers while in the meetings. But then it overwhelms what I guess is a limited bandwidth issue in that office and causes the whole thing to shut down. So we've asked now several times in public and private about getting that addressed. So I am publicly making the request again that whatever office of technology is involved with assisting with this, or if it's a private contractor, whatever it is, we really need to get it fixed.
back. Hear us?
No internet open.
Hi,
Yes.
welcome back. You're still blurry, but you're perfectly audible.
The public access,
So,
or does it mean no internet?
all right. And are we confirmed that the public is able to hear us and all that?
So,
Okay,
Yes, that's
so
confirmed. The feed is still good.
great, thank you so much. So here's what I would suggest as we finish this discussion. I hear sort of a potential consensus emerging on some of the suggestions, keeping a list, flipping the order of meetings when necessary. I hear more of a different or broader range of views on things like committees and ad hoc structures. I would volunteer, if that's acceptable to the rest of the group, to work with the chair to write up a report with potential proposals for the full commission to consider on these issues. My sense of how I would draft this is essentially to say, look, some of us are skeptical of committees, some of us support them. All of us seem to agree that on some issues they work better than others, and that we should revisit the existing structure. And so, it may not be everybody's ideal, but my view would be we should move forward with a sort of hybrid approach where we continue to have some standing committees, since there are some commissioners who feel pretty strongly that those are useful, and that other committees maybe aren't necessary and can be revisited, but that the chair should go through that process of thinking about those issues with a task list in front of him, and with an eye towards making sure that everybody on the commission knows which tasks have been assigned to whom. Again, I'm just proposing to draft this as a proposal for people's feedback, not as an edict. Does anybody are people okay with that? Does anybody have thoughts on that?
I have one comment on that. I don't get the impression that there's a big dissension around committee meetings. That's not what I'm hearing. I think there's one commissioner who's absolutely opposed to it, to committees. And we've got and some of us are saying, including one person who I think disagreed today, is that the committees are not functioning because of the open meetings law.
It's not going to change for at least 6 months.
Yeah, but we're long term. Right now, we're saying it may affect us short term, but overall, you're saying you're opposed to the committee.
No, I'm not, I don't have my opinions there on that at all.
That's what I'm saying. It's not, I don't think that the way you paraphrased it is what we came to today. My sense is still there. Gone?
Still here.
Oh, we don't see you anymore. Oh, there you go. Okay. My sense
Hi,
is
still
that
here.
there's one individual, one commissioner who's absolutely opposed to it. But the most of us who have any problems with it, it's because of the open meetings law. We need to sit down and assess what we're individually doing to prioritize how many committees we should have. But I think the consensus is we'll go with a hybrid. Not because a lot of people are opposed to committees. It just makes sense to have a combination, have the flexibility to have both. Draft something around.
I think that's fair. I will say I've had more than one commissioner express skepticism about committees to me. It's not just one person. We have two commissioners who are now not participating in any committees because of their view, and I've had a third commissioner express to me a skepticism about whether we need them. And then I would add myself as a sort of potential fourth committee skeptic. I think they're okay, but I don't necessarily think we need them, depending on the issue. But anyway, I think regardless of people's underlying motivations, what it seems to me we all have in common is Commissioner Edwards, what you just said at the end there, that we should look case by case and figure out what's going to work best. And for some things, it may be a committee. For some things, it may be something else. So that's what I would plan to to draft up, but I certainly would welcome people's thoughts on whatever I draft, and don't expect anybody to just automatically agree with it.
Commissioner Ayers, if I
Yeah.
might. So, just so I'm clear, we're,
Yeah.
we will work together to get a proposal to the full board on committee structure, or a list of things that have been assigned to committees or working groups, or both. I just want to be clear
Oh,
about
right.
what's being proposed.
Yeah. So right. So I would say I'm gonna. I do think we have consensus. It'd be good to have a list of all of our outstanding tasks. So yeah, I'm just going to start working with you on that, and then completely separate from that, but hopefully benefiting, to work on just drafting up my summary of this conversation, including what I think are a couple of proposals that seem to me likely to command a consensus, on flipping the meetings, and adopting a sort of hybrid approach where we may have some standing committees, but other issues can be addressed ad hoc, which would mean significantly revising Resolution 2204, because that calls for, I think, more standing committees than are currently existing. So that would be my, if that sounds good to you.
No, that works for me if it's the consensus of this group.
Okay, any other thoughts?
I'm good with it.
Okay. All right, then
I'm sorry, so you're gonna do a list of what you're making a list of what? Of the committees and the issues and the people that are working on separate things, is that it?
exactly, yeah, yeah. So that
Okay.
we all
So
have that in front of us.
that's
We all
not
know.
established right now. It's something that we'll learn about when you do your list, I guess, right?
I mean, I'm not aware of any existing document that I assume the chair has notes on what he's assigned to whom, and we may all have notes on that, but yeah,
Almost
I'm not aware of
everything.
any document that.
Yeah, almost everything that that we've done in this regard is codified in the minutes of our meetings.
Right.
Yeah.
But he also said, we also have a list from you, Fred, of requirements. It may have to be updated, but you sent that out early on.
Would
Yeah.
it be helpful for Stan,
Of
for
who-
the staff to do the list and circulate it to us and then have us review it?
I think we should leave it to Fred and Evan to just get this done, however they think appropriate.
Whatever you say.
There was, as Commissioner Cardozo was pointing out, a list from the initial committee organizational meeting that had various issues, including legislative issues. For each committee, we moved on substantially since that time, but there is at least that core kind of original document. Yeah.
Well, I would recommend circulating the original document.
I'll recirculate that.
Okay, thank you.
We probably didn't, no, we don't have an orientation package for new members. Which includes committee structure, who are members, what are the issues. As people circulate on and off the board, it might be helpful to have that.
I think that's.
It's something that staff routinely maintains. We haven't had an occasion to update it, but yeah, we'll see that that's provided.
All right. So with that, can I get a motion to move into executive session to discuss personnel-related matters?
No.
Michael Cardozo, so moved. Seconded.
Second.
Commissioner Edwards, I think. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone
Okay, we'll go
opposed?
ahead. Oh,
You're live.
Okay, Sandy?
Yes, the report out is that in executive session, the committee discussed the staff evaluation process. Thank you.
Okay, and with that, can I get a motion to adjourn?
I'll move.
So moved by Commissioner Cardozo, seconded.
Second,
Commissioner Caraballo.
Edwards, Carballo seconds. All in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? And anyone abstaining? All right, we're adjourned. Thanks so much, everyone.